Sorry, just got put on mute then. Hey Sarah, how are you? Hey Craig, nice to see you. Lots of friendly faces. Claudine, you always look happy and smiling. Good morning. Okay, we're going to get started, and this is Angie, I think this is our third. Is this our third or fourth? Third morning pep talk.
Third.
And really, the objective of today is to put a spring in your step and give you some practical knowledge to take away that you can make a change and make the world a better place for yourself. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we meet on the traditional, now some of us are not in South Australia, but where I'm sitting right now, meet on the traditional country of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains, and we would pay respect to elders past and present. We recognise and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationship with the land. We acknowledge that they have continuing importance to the Kaurna people living today. I'm very excited to welcome Faith and Kath. Just give us a wave. Thank you so much to you both for joining us. Some great speakers we have today. And also, Anthony, always a pleasure to have you as my partner in crime in this series. So thank you very much. I'm going to just quickly go to our panelists and get them to do a very brief welcome and introduction. And then we're going to get them to do a 3-minute insight. And then we'll open up for everyone to do Q&A. So can I just remind you all to place your questions in the chat box. We welcome any and all questions. And so please type them in the chat box at any time you'd like to. So Faith, I'd just like to get you to do a brief intro on who is Faith. You're on mute, Faith.
Thank you very much for that intro, Natasha. My name is Faith, and I am, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge traditional custodians of a country that I get to eat, play, love, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. But I am a Sydney-based psychotherapist. I run retreats and workshops, and I'm also a visionary and the founder and CEO of Silver Sirens, which is an age-positive community disrupting the negative stigma that surrounds women and aging. That's me.
Wonderful. Kath?
Hello, everybody. I'm coming to you from Kaurna country in Adelaide. And I, as you can see, have had many learning experiences across my life. One is to let my hair go grey at the age of 50. And I know, Faith, I knew you'd like that. I'm an executive coach and organisational development expert, and I reckon I have probably coached 300 women over my career, and there are some very common threads that we all experience, and I'm really interested in learning from my co-panelists today and also from those of you in the room as to how we can tackle the future issues related to a diverse workforce, and in particular women and their decision making.
Thank you, Kath, and very pleased that you can both join us today. So now I'm just going to jump straight to you, and if you could share your 3-minute insight with us.
Thank you again, Natasha. So I'm a business person. I've been a business person all my life. My very first business venture was at school at the age of 9. So I think some of us are just made to do our own thing. And I remember the age of 9 saying to my mother, "Don't tell me what to do." And that was an indicator of that I was always going to want to run my own ship. And that's kind of the way it was. And for me, in 2015, I made one of those, I think, bravest decision, one of the hardest decision, and that was to close a fashion business that I've been running for 15 years. And that was my heart, and it was my identity. And I threw every single thing into it. And looking back, there were clear signs that I should have gotten out. You know, one of the insights around that business was, you know, when I got the clear indications by, you know, lots of markers were indicating that it was time to get out of the business, that I'd been burnt out, financially it wasn't viable, but I just kept holding on. And looking back, you know, I would wish that I'd listened to some of those indicators and made a move earlier. But, you know, and I don't believe there's any such thing as failures. And those last 4 years that I hung in there, I think I learned a lot about myself, but I also learned, most importantly, what not to do in business. And the other insight that I have, I'd love to share with you, is fear of jumping into a new business. So after that business, I experienced what I consider to be midlife crisis, which led me to create Silver Sirens. But I had a huge fear of starting again. You know, there was a real sense that I'd failed in this venture, and how could I begin again? And I literally had to kind of muster all my courage with a lot of support, like lovely coaches like Anjani and other mentors that I get to work with, you know, gave me the courage to start again. And that was a very, very big thing for me. You know, again, I shared that the business was a big part of my identity. So kind of coming back, feeling like I'd failed and coming back again, it was a big thing. And my last insight I'd like to share is that for me, it was very, very brave to ask for help. So about a year ago, I'd been running my businesses on my own for a very, very long time. And I'm very good at doing that. I'm very good at juggling a lot of things. I'm very organized. I'm very good at contracting out. But I had to learn to get help in the business and start to structure my business in a way where other people can come in. And that was difficult. You know, it was very, very difficult to let go and to trust that other people could get my vision and hold my vision and help me grow my businesses. And what I've learned is, I remember a long time ago, therapists confronted me about my busy addiction. And what I found was that there is something about always, the adrenaline that I get from that place of always being busy actually keeps me on a bit of a high, but it also means that I'm never fully engaged in any activities that I take, because I'm always literally rushing from one thing to the other. So one of the things I've kind of promised myself this year, and I've started to do, is making sure that my week has enough breadth and enough space that I can fully be present for everything that I'm doing, as opposed to finishing one thing, ticking, moving on to the next. So that's what I'd like to share.
Wonderful. Thank you, Faith. And thanks for being, you know, vulnerable and real then. And I didn't say earlier, but I'm hoping you'll know that the theme today is making brave decisions. And so that was a great insight. Thank you very much. Speaking of brave decisions, if I'm looking a bit tired for everyone looking at me, I slept out on rough last night to raise money for an organisation that supports the homeless. So that was a brave decision for myself. Kath, I welcome you to share your insight now.
Thank you very much for that. I'm excited to learn more about everybody's stories of personal power and decision making. And I guess, like you, I've had times in my professional career where self-limiting beliefs, fear and imposter syndrome have held me back. In these situations, the decisions we make are driven more by fear than by who we really are, or in my case, who we really want to be. And I know that professional development takes ongoing discipline and will, and sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's difficult, but we all pick up nuggets along the way and we shape them to suit our unique selves, and then we try to embed them in our future behaviour. And I wanted to share with you two of the nuggets that I've learned along the way, and I call them my double Susan approach. In her book, Fierce Conversations, Susan Scott urged me to step out from behind myself to be a better communicator. And if you're familiar with Susan's work, it's getting a bit old, but the old nuggets are really good. And I've extrapolated her advice to include most aspects of personal leadership, including decision making. And I wanted to share with you a couple of things, those insights that I got from her book. I know that if I'm sensitive to my own emotions, that's a good thing, right? But if I'm controlled by them, that's not so good. I've learned that what I do is who I am. So by knowing myself and what I really stand for, I'm acting authentically. And I know that so much of what I do comes from my unconscious self. So I've learned to be sensitive to situations and reflect on how I'm responding to them. In other words, I've learned to get my unconscious self out of the way. It helps me to be more purposeful rather than busy, Faith, more brave and have fewer self-limiting beliefs. So that's my first Susan in my double Susan approach. Many of you will have already heard of my second Susan's wise words. Susan Jeffers encouraged us all to feel the fear and do it anyway. And my reflections on this have led me to understand that courage, like most skills, is built over time through repetition and experience. Courageousness in decision-making requires perseverance or grit. And I know I show bravery when I know what is right and I decide to do what is right, despite possible negative consequences to me. And I know that this builds my credibility, my self-esteem, and my confidence. And so I guess I've learned that my power comes from my growth, and much of the time, growth comes from my own discomfort and effort. I can readily recall many examples of exercising professional courage early in my career, because of course they came with some pain and discomfort. But I have to say that in recent years, it's become a much more comfortable experience to exercise my power. I find it relatively easy to stand with people, or to stand up for what's important, or to stand for what I believe in, or to stand down if that's the wisest action. And I guess most of all, to remain standing with a calm confidence. So I hope these nuggets have been helpful to you and give you some reflections on your brave decision-making in the future.
Perfect, Kath. Thank you for the double Susan. Anthony, I'm going to hand over to you now to reflect back on what our panelists have just shared with us.
Yeah, it's very rich. I was writing furiously because there's lots of nuggets in there. So Faith talked about following the clear signs, and this is so important. When we get the hit, the warning lights, often we don't listen to them. We stay busy, we ignore them, we think they'll go away, and they're not going to. And so really making sure that you follow the signs that come to you. And Faith mentioned a few: burnout, financially not viable, and also I would like to add not enjoying it. So that's one of the things that Faith shared with us. She also said a fear of failure and who would I become if I make a change. And so making a brave decision is trusting that there is no such thing as failure. And then thirdly, asking for help. As women, we often multitask, and it's difficult for us to ask for help or even trust others to bring them in to really work in the business with the same gusto, passion that we have, the same quality, the same level, and trust is a big one. So thank you for that, Faith. Kath with the double Susan, that's a good one to remember. So you made that distinction of sensitive versus being controlled by emotions, being sensitive to them rather than allowing them to control us to make brave decisions. And being true to ourselves is very important. And a lot of what we do comes from our unconscious self. So mastering a bit more self-awareness so that we can understand what is coming up from the unconscious that is stopping us making a brave decision. And then the second Susan was, she talked about courage being built over time. It's not that you just get it one day, that you actually have to build it over time by growing and going through discomfort, doing things that are not comfortable to grow yourself until then you grow your courage. And so those were great, really great insights, lots of insights in there. And I'll add my own. So for me, when it comes to making brave decisions, I talk about it in terms of understanding that the fear that stops us making the brave decisions is where we need to go to in order to make a courageous or brave decision. And so how do we deal with our fear? And a lot of people say, feel the fear and do it anyway. And I say, it's important that we relate to regulate. And what I mean by that is we have to relate to our fear in order to regulate it, not to stop it, not to suppress it, not to push it down, not to ignore it, not to eat it away, not to busy it away, but to relate to it. And then when we relate to it, when we sit with our fear, it will give us some information. It's always got something to tell us. So finding that message, understanding what's going on more deeply within ourselves so that we can liberate ourselves from that fear. And then the decision is super easy. We don't have to force our way, which is the masculine yang, force it. We can do that. I've done that. I burnt myself out twice doing it. So relate to regulate our emotions. Then we feel more in control. Then the decision is easy.
Thank you, Anjani. There's so much there, but if I could just say to everyone on the online, ask for help today. If that's a little practical takeaway you can all start doing, because I think that's important that we all support one another and we ask for help. Now we've got a couple of questions, and I'm going to start with the second question in the chat, Faith. How did you decide it was time to ask for help?
Yeah, and I love that question. Thank you, Tanya, for posing it. And there's a practical element to that. I came to a place of seeing myself running around doing lots of tasks that I didn't enjoy and I wasn't very good at. And I had to look at and consider what was my hourly rate worth, what was my time worth. And sitting down and looking at that on paper, I realized that it was much more beneficial for my business and myself for me to hire someone else to do that. And then I could focus on doing more of what I like. So it's that practical thing we hear, but literally that is what it was. That's what it came down to. And then two, I really, for me, being kind to myself in the process, the business, I want to enjoy my work. I've always said to myself, I will never do something I don't like doing. And, and there's statistics that say 60 to 70% of people don't enjoy their work. And that makes me feel horrified. And I never want to be that person. So I love my businesses. I'm passionate about my businesses. And if I get to a place where I'm not enjoying it, that's not serving me or all the people that I'm claiming to serve. So for me, I had to look at, can I practically afford it? And how much was it impacting me, that's not wasted, but using my time to do work that I wasn't particularly good at or enjoying. So those are the things that I considered.
Thank you, Faith. Kath, would you like to share your answer?
Thank you. Asking for help, it feels like you're inadequate. It's, it kind of conjures up notions of I'm not good enough, or somebody else needs to help me out of here. And I'd like to reposition that or reframe that and say we're asking to collaborate with others, or we're being purposeful about getting things done that we know are important to get done. So again, if you come out from behind yourself and go, what is it that needs to be done in order to achieve my goals, in order to get this decision right, then help isn't exactly the word. That can be self-limiting. It is important to kind of go, well, I'm collaborating on this, or it's a way to get things done.
Thank you, Kath. And whilst I've got you there, Kath, Melissa's asked a question which I want to throw to you, if I may. Using the words of having to be brave to have courage. Why do we have to align the words of having to be brave to have courage? How do we differentiate those words?
Yeah. Well, thanks for that, Melissa. I knew that you would ask a question like that. I don't think you have to. Again, it implies that we're self-limiting, and yes, in many ways we kind of are, but I don't think it's necessary. I do think that it's important that we just get on and do what needs to be done. And sometimes women can be their own worst enemy in this regard. Those of you who know me hear me say quite often, said no man ever. And I don't think many men ever talk about having to be brave or courage in decision making, unless of course it's planning a holiday with their partner or something. But when it comes down to it, I don't think we do need to align brave and courage. We just need to be purposeful.
Thank you, Kath. And Faith, would you like to share?
Yeah, look, for me, I use the word interchangeably. So Melissa, I'm not quite sure if I've 100% understood what it is that what you're asking, but my interpretation of the question is, for me, bravery is facing my fear. Bravery or any act of bravery will always mean pushing myself out of my comfort zone, doing something that makes me feel uncomfortable, And what I've come to know is most things that make me feel uncomfortable is there to grow me and will stretch me. And I have learned to lean into that because, we've been around for a while on the planet. So I've had enough experience in my businesses, in my personal life to know that when I've done that, there's so much more on the other side. And the fear that I project will be there. Usually on the other side, there's nothing there. And I love that cheesy saying that says, fear is like a mouse with a foghorn. And that's exactly it. It feels scary, it's big, it's threatening, it's a big block. But when I push through it, which takes courage to do that, I usually find there's a lot of rewards on the other side.
Thank you. And Anthony, I'll throw to you and you can add your comments, but there's also a question from Kim to you. When you referred to sit with your fear, what are your tips to uncover, release these fears?
Yeah, it's a little process that you can do with yourself, by yourself. And when you notice fear bubbling up, noticing it in your body, so you can sit with yourself. So it just takes for you to close your eyes for a moment and just dial into your body and notice where that fear is sitting in your body. And you might be surprised, you'll actually notice it sitting somewhere, particularly in your body. And then what you do is you befriend that feeling or sensation. So you imagine it like an old friend knocking on your door, needing your help. So rather than being scared of it, you welcome it in. You welcome it and you ask it what it's trying to tell you, what it's trying to say to you. It's called a presence practice. And so you just kind of sit with it. So for me, often I'll notice it in the pit of my stomach. So then I'll take my awareness to my stomach and I will sit with that feeling until I get another intuitive hit or I start to feel it moving. Often it will dissipate all by itself and then an ease will come and then I can get on with that task that I was really scared to do or, whatever it is that I'm fearful of. So just sitting with it, close your eyes, dial into it, find out where it is in the body and then befriend it. Let it know I'm here, I'm listening. What do you need to say? Often it will dissipate, but sometimes it will give you some information and that's really rich. I hope that answers your question, Kim. Great question.
It was a very good question. And Kath, I might just come back to you in terms of maybe some practical tips around sitting with fear, but you also referred in your insight about the unconscious. So I'll just get you to sort of expand a bit more on that.
In a lot of my coaching, there are instances where I will suggest something to somebody and they'll go, how did you know that? And oftentimes people who know you better than sometimes you can explain yourself. Mm-hmm. And one of the tips that I use is to get people to journal, to challenge themselves and what they're actually thinking, to be able to see what is driving their behaviour in the written form in front of them rather than having it going around and around and around in their head, because fear begets fear, and unless it's addressed and it's kind of dealt with, it can actually become quite paralysing. And so the idea of coming up behind yourself can be unconscious and it can be conscious. The conscious is easy to deal with. The unconscious, however, sometimes requires some assistance or some external impetus to get past it. And so journaling is one of those things that you can do on your own. But of course, you've got really great people around you, whether you pay for them professionally or whether they're colleagues or mentors who can help you to unpack some of that unconscious self.
Yeah, it's a good point, Kath, that you make, because it's important to understand that sometimes there are blocks that we come up against, there are challenges that we come up against. The fear that we have inside of us is too large for us to deal with by ourselves, and we actually need some help. And I say that it's not a solo sport. Running a business is not a solo sport. And it's important that you have a mentor or a coach or someone who you can turn to and work through any fear that you might have coming up, because it's that's blocking your growth. It's that's blocking your ability to get to where you want to be. And so it's really important that you do lean into someone, ask for help, get a mentor, get a coach, and work through that for yourself and develop your personal leadership. That's the richest thing you can do. It's the best investment you can have in your business and in your life as well. Thank you, Kath.
Thank you. That's some wonderful, rich insights there. There's a long list. Faith, you started Silver Sirens and made brave decisions in that context. Just share with us what that journey looked like and tell us a little bit more about Silver Sirens.
Yeah, hi, thank you for that. For Silver Sirens, it's called Silver Sirens Redefining Aging, and it's a movement for women over 50. Because in my psychotherapy practice about 7 years ago, I started being referred women who were struggling with the aging process. And as a woman of African descent, the idea of struggling, of being fearful of aging was completely foreign to me. So, it was a revelation, to understand their feelings. And as I was working with the first woman, she started to refer other women to me. And at one stage, I had 8 women in my private practice, and we were dealing with the fear of aging. And that's what made me start something, because I realized there was a need to offer an alternative belief around aging. And I understood too that, it's a very Western construct. The woman's value is only around her looks and being fertile. Once she's past that stage, that she has no more value, and women worry about being invisible and not being relevant. So I really wanted to disrupt that. So that's how Silver Sirens started 4 years ago. This is our 5th year. We run annual events and we have wonderful speakers, different topics. And this year's event is the 1st of October. Last year, we had the beautiful Tracy Spicer and Tara Moss as our keynote speaker. This year, we're aiming for equally luminous speakers. And our topics we're covering this year are empty nest. Where the first time we're inviting men into the space. We're asking, is aging easier for men? And we're exploring sexuality after 50. And we also have a section called Our Elders Are Treasures, because I do believe strongly there's an African saying that when an old person dies, a library dies with them. So I love to kind of create spaces to mine the wisdom of our elders. So we have a section called Elders Are Treasures. And this year we're looking at mastering grief, because if you're in your 70s upwards, a woman, you've probably lost a few people. How do you navigate and master that terrain? So that's a little bit about this year's event.
Fantastic. That's thanks for sharing that, Faith, and what a wonderful initiative. I am just conscious we've got about a minute to go before we wrap up. We always like to finish on time. So I might just hand over to you to summarise and conclude the formalities.
Thanks, Natasha. It sounds like you've gone into space. I don't know what happened to your volume there. She's just gone into space. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen who've jumped on the call today. We do appreciate your time, and it's interesting how we all have fear, and yet it's not really spoken about because it can seem like a weakness in business. And so it's important that we have these conversations so we normalize the fact that we're all probably terrified most of the time in business and in our work, and that's normal. What isn't normal is, talking about it and sharing about it so that we can start to normalize it. So thank you so much for being here. We do have a poll. It's just one question. If you could, we'll launch the poll now. If you could answer the poll questions, that would be great. It helps us. We are starting to run these monthly. So once every Friday, we're going to be running one on different topics. If you have any suggestions on topics that you would like us to cover, any suggestions of speakers you would like us to get, or anyone you'd like to put forward as a speaker, we would love to hear from you. If there's any budding speakers, we'd love to hear from you too. And thank you so much for your time. And we will see you next month. And we're running these up until October, or until you tell us you don't want them anymore. But they're going really well, and we're really enjoying your participation and your questions. And if you do have questions after, for any of the speakers or Natasha or myself, please feel free to email us. You can contact us at any time, and feel free to ask us anything. We're here to support you and here to grow this conversation, which is really important around women's empowerment. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Anthony. Enjoy your day, everyone. Thank you, Faith. Thank you, Kath. And they're the poll results.